Hello and welcome to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and I'm joined as always on this most glorious of Fridays by Jim Orr. How you doing, Jim?
Good, Laura, thanks.
And I don't know if you'll have heard of this guy before, but we've got another guest on the show. I wanted to call you a podcast mogul, but I don't actually know what a mogul is, so I probably shouldn't call you names without knowing exactly what it means. But I'm joined by Paul John Dykes. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, Laura. Whatever you call me, I have definitely been called worse on Twitter, so feel free to call me a mogul if you desire.
Or Tony Haggerty Light. There you go.
Tony Haggerty Light. Wow.
I'm the sub.
We're expecting you to make his greet today, Paul. That's the minimum requirement if Tony's not here.
That's the remit. Yeah.
Tony is, of course, covering the
My
pre-match.
dog just died. Excellent.
Tony's covering the pre-match presser today, which is where he's obviously most at home with all his years' experience in journalism. But we will we'll move on without him and see how we get on. Thanks everybody for joining us today on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you are joining us. I don't know if you managed to tune in the other night, but we had quite a big victory over the team across the city. Rangers, of course, the other night, a 3-0 victory, and that will take up the majority of the show today. We'll also got into some transfer rumours involving some players. And my main worry after that Rangers game is that the world was watching and that there might be a Monaco-style picking at the carcass at the end of the season, but maybe I'm panicking a little bit too much, but we'll get into it. Paul, I'll come to you first. What was your thoughts on the game? I believe you, I may be mistaken, but I believe you had a ticket to the game this week. So how was it for first of all, given that you've not been able to make it to many matches this season because of your other commitments, what was it like to be there for a night like that?
Basically a glory hunter, eh? You know, just wait until the big games come along and then we'll rock up. Yeah, that's it. I love everything about going to, always have done, driving up London Road and seeing the paradise, you know, the figure just appearing on the horizon. That whole thing was giving me a buzz, as it always does. But in the same vehicle was young Kelvin, who I think you've met him. Kelvin's the man behind the camera, if you like, with A Celtic State of Mind. And he had never been inside Celtic Park. He'd been up there filming with a few different things we were working on, one of which actually is the Willie Maley Memorial statue that we're raising funds for, and we're helping the Willie Maley CSC and raising funds for that. So I loved every minute of it, Laura. I went into it, interesting enough, quite confident, and that's unusual because I never go into these games. Even, there was a spell, I suppose, under Brendan Rodgers where it was how many were you going to win by? There was a wee spell, maybe a wee bit arrogant at the time, but we had a great side and they didn't. But going into this one, I did think Wednesday night was the night to get that monkey off our back. I didn't expect it with so much panache, but I'm still buzzing about it, to be honest with you. I think you might have got that yesterday when JP and I were on. We're just buzzing about that. But then straight away you're looking on to the next game. I think that's probably what Ange will be doing as well. Right, we've enjoyed it. Let's get back to business. Let's take care of business on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of buzzing about it, I don't know if anybody managed to catch my solo half-time coverage of the game when Kevin over in Hungary was having trouble getting on. I was basically buzzing after that third Abada goal. I was high as a kite, and I don't even know to this day what came out of my mouth. Hopefully nothing too embarrassing, apart from obviously comparing Rio Hatate to Paul Scholes. But that is what I do. That is what I do, and I never learn. Jim, you've told me before, don't go on the match coverage. I get myself far too excited.
Indeed, indeed.
Jim, you were there.
Laura, can I interrupt? I heard someone at the game comparing Hatate to Scholes. So you're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Thank you very much. He's basically Scholes is sort of another way of saying an all-round midfielder, but we'll get into Hatate and some of the other standout performances as the show goes on. Jim, you were there obviously as a season ticket holder yourself. First of all, your overall impression of the game and what were your feelings going into it and how did it turn out for you?
I just think, to follow on from Paul's point, the atmosphere was fantastic. I think a few weeks ago we were thinking nobody will bet this game. And then you go along the other night, 60,000. under the lights, and when they do the bit where they black the whole thing out and they put the green spotlight on the team, and that's just kind of pure theatre. So it is, and I think that's the way forward. I'd have home fans only if it was up to me. I think they started it with a reduced allocation of it, but I just thought the atmosphere, obviously, the way we played and we won the game added to it. But I thought just before the game, the kind of, and you'll never hear a better rendition of "You'll Never Walk Alone." It lasted forever, and I just think everyone was up for it, and everyone was like Paul said, was all kind of buzzing for the game. And I think the fact it was all home fans, because having been to a lot of these games over the years, when the atmosphere's not that great at these games, it's the fans shouting and bawling at each other, and a lot of the focus is taken off the pitch, the bedlam that happens outside the ground. So one of the things I took from the other night, I'd gladly have all the games home fans only, Celtic Park and Ibrox. Notwithstanding that, I think we come out really quickly. My concerns going into the game are twofold: keep the wingers quiet and defend set pieces. And I thought Juranovic and Taylor, that was a lot of both of their best games in a Celtic jersey. Carter Vickers, Starfelt didn't give them much at the back. I thought set pieces we defended very high with a very high line, which made it more difficult for them as well. I never caught the podcast yesterday, but I'd imagine there's not much more you can say about that first half. Which was just fantastic first half. Shame we didn't score a few more goals from a goal difference point of view, because obviously they would have counted double, given the fact we're playing against them. Before the game, I kind of thought the first goal was a winner. I thought who would score first would win the game, and if they scored it early enough, they'd win it quite well. And then fortunately we get the goal and things panned out well. Second half dipped, understandable given the intensity of the first half. But it would have been good to go along and maybe one score 4 or 5. That would have really dented their confidence. But but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just 3 points. I think you have to look at it, and I think also the fact that they had no fans in the game. It to me, it seemed like not any other game, but like most games where you've got virtually 60,000 Celtic fans there. It's a big game. You're playing against your closest rivals, but it's 3 points at the end of the day. And Paul alluded to there, it's nothing if they don't go and pick up 3 points on Sunday against Motherwell. So it's good to be top of the league. I think it's the first time we're on the podcast where we've been top of the league, so it's a bit unusual. Feel quite giddy to be top of the league. So I'm always that negative old bloke, so I'm feeling quite confident. I said I was on a fortnight ago that I thought if we won the derby, we would go on and win the league. But I thought at that point we might get to within 2 points of them. The fact that we're top of the league, you think, well, let's just go on and kick on from here.
Yeah, there's a few interesting points brought up there, but just want to say afternoon to everybody. Feed the Bear, commenting as always. Everybody afternoon to everybody watching. Get in the comments and give us your thoughts on the game if you haven't already done so this week. Paul, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that point that Jim raised, and I think a worry that was going through all of our heads. Obviously, Hatate scored that goal in 5 minutes, and there was part of us that was wishing for us to really put the foot down and go through Rangers and really dominate them for the rest of the match. And but as always happens with Celtic, we got loads of chances. For a big portion of the first half, Alan McGregor looked as if he was going to prove the difference. Was there a bit of you throughout that first half that thought maybe this is going to go the way so many of the games have gone in the past? Maybe they're going to ride their luck a little bit and get a chance later on in the game?
Well, this, Laura, I'm not saying this just with hindsight, but I was really relaxed in that first half. And it's interesting when you look at the 10 minutes or so before we score the second goal. I found that probably the nervy bit of the night. That was the bit where I'm thinking, we can't really go in at 1-0 because we're so dominant. And I expected changes at half-time, and I expected the changes to shore up Rangers. I didn't expect any of the changes that they were going to make would be offensive or creative in the slightest. If anything, they were just going to try and shore us up. So when we score the second goal, I'm thinking that's far more in keeping with the game I've just watched at half-time, and of course we get the third. But I've got to say, and it wasn't cockiness, going into that game, I felt that we had already done our scraping through bit in the games leading into it. And then, the flip side of that with regards to the form that Rangers had been on, they had dropped a few points. We kept saying it, someone is going to get Inverness clack the cudding, I think Tony Haggerty calls it. And eventually, seeing how I'm sitting in Tony's seat, I better use some of his terminology. And sitting at half-time, I was thinking at that point, like Jim, and there's been occasions in the past like this, I was thinking we need to take 5. But again, this season, we've been in that situation at 2-0 up at half-time, and it stayed 2-0 or maybe even 2-1 by the end of the game. But I rewatched it, which is something that our very own Jim Orr has suggested that you do with regards to the games, because the emotion is gone by then. Only slightly gone when it's Rangers. So I did rewatch it. And in the second half, maybe at the game, I thought to myself that once again, is it a point of discussion that we've taken the foot off the gas? And actually watching it back, I don't think our tempo changed a great deal. I really don't think the tempo, we just didn't create the chances, but that may well be down to some of the changes that were made on the other side. Van Bronckhorst obviously made substitutions at half-time. He's maybe changed the game plan at half-time, Laura, and he's basically blocked out a lot of the creativity that we undoubtedly had. But I don't think it was just a game of we were brilliant in the first half and we managed it in the second. I really, watching the game back, I still thought we maintained that kind of tempo, and I can't wait for those who are on the injury table to come back, because we're going to have a substitutes bench, which means that the tempo will not dip. Come 60, 65, 70 minutes, we'll have Maeda to come on. We'll have, Kyogo, I'm sure will start. We'll have Rogic to come into the side. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking back to a game. I'm trying to find it. Often on the bulletin, Laura, I'm sitting in front of Celtic Wiki. So a big shout out to the work that the guys do in the Celtic Wiki. I'm trying to find a similar chain of events, and I'm sure my mates and I went to a game where we won 3-0 under Lenny at a canter, and we went to Fir Park and they beat us. I think Charlie Mulgrew messed up a pass back in the first 5 minutes. So I'm going to get the specifics of those two games, because that is in the back of my mind. Yeah. Let's take care of Motherwell now on Sunday.
I have a vague recollection of that, because I think I was at the 3-0 game. Maybe Chris Commons scored in that game. I don't know.
He did, aye. It bent. Remember the swerve on it? Aye. Yeah, same game.
I was behind the goal that game. But you've got some listeners agreeing with you. I have to say, Paul Byrne on YouTube says, I have to say I like this starting 11. It's going to be weird putting in Rogic, Maeda, or even Turnbull and Kyogo at some point. What great problems to have. Also got people slightly disagreeing. Red Scotland says he only relaxed when the third goal went in. But given the point that Paul's made there, Jim, and the underwater cabbage salesman is kind of asking the same question. Did we gas out in the second half, or was it part of the game plan? Where do you stand on that? There's been a lot of talk about, the intensity we play with and maybe not being up to fitness, whether that affected the second half or whether it was part of the plan all along. What do you think about that?
I think I tend to agree with what Paul said there. I think it's quite similar to the Hibs game, where Hibs came out and they were quite expansive in the first half, and we went 2 goals up, and then they changed it in the second half. They became a bit more defensive and tried to shore things up, and I think that's what happened the other night. And I think we were tired as well. I mean, that last 20 minutes, Matt O'Reilly was dead in his feet. You could see he was struggling to run. Hatate, as Ange said, he's not fit yet. I mean, you got a good 55, 60 minutes out of Hatate, but we need more than that. So obviously that will come in time, I think. But I just think because of the intensity that we play at, I think it's inevitable. Until we get 5 high-quality subs coming on, I think that's going to be the case. And I think something I said last year, I think having 5 subs should work to our advantage, given the size of squad that we've got, given the quality of players that we've got. And you tend not to change your back 4 or your goalkeeper unless they get injured, and you would never change Callum McGregor. And that just leaves the 5 offensive players. So you basically change all your 5 offensive players. I'm not saying you do it at half-time, but you can bring on a couple of players at half-time to freshen things up, because it is a long, hard season. February's going to be a pretty tough month. So use the squad, and I think the quality of player is now there. And as Paul said, these guys coming back from injury, that'll add depth to it as well. So everything's looking good. I mean, just keep on going. And the other thing I like is how we play. We know how we're going to play, and there was times, certainly last season, and even seasons gone past, you weren't that sure how we're going to play. We know exactly how we're going to play, and we've got better players than all the other teams bar one, and that's arguable whether we're better than that team or not. We certainly showed that the other night. So if you go in the park, first part, and play our game, don't do anything silly, then we should win. And that should be the case for most of the games. But obviously, football doesn't work like that. But it's all good going forward. I just think that having the 5 subs should make a big difference. And I think also as the season goes on, players are going to get more and more tired with more and more games. We've got the Europa Conference League games coming up as well, and that's all going to add to it as well. So Ange's got a difficult job trying to maintain all this stuff. And what I also said a few weeks ago was, if I can use the iceberg analogy, that all we see is the teams Ange picks and the subs he makes. And underneath the water, he's making like hundreds of decisions, thousands of decisions each week about who to play. I mean, the fact that McGregor played the other night was astonishing. And Ange must have, it wasn't an easy choice to make. I'd have thought, because he could get badly hurt again. So these are all the decisions that are done behind the scenes that all we see is the team he's picked. And goals change games. I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about last Saturday or not, but if we don't score that goal in the last minute, then the narrative completely changes. Football fans are very, very fickle. Ange would be getting slaughtered last week if we didn't score that goal. But now he's like, fantastic. And the same goes for Yakimakis. I think some of the stuff has been said about the big champ is pretty harsh. 1 week is a dud, next week is great, dud, great, dud, great. Give him time, he'll get there. I think Ange's got an eye for a player. I'm pretty happy with the players that he's bought. And the fact, as people have said, 9 of the 11 that started the other night are Ange signings. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wilster92 on Twitch, one of our few commenters on Twitch, a wee tip for you guys: if you want your comment to get picked out, maybe try and go on Twitch, because that wee purple logo stands out when we're picking out comments. But he agrees with you. Ange Ball is a squad game. The big man's right. More subs will work to our advantage. So I think you're the big man, Jim, as far as that's concerned.
I don't think that's the case, but hey, that's Tony Haggerty. Tony Haggerty's the big man, yeah.
Paul, I don't often... We will go on to the Dundee United game and a little bit more in depth of the individual players in the Rangers game as well, as Jim was talking about, but I don't often get to ask you questions that are a little bit more in depth about your support of Celtic and your preferences and that, so I'm taking the opportunity today while I have it. Both you and Jim have talked about enjoying the way that we play, enjoying the football that we put across there today. And obviously both of you have said in the past that ultimately trophies is what matters, winning games is what matters. But how important is it as a Celtic supporter to see a performance like that first half, where, for me anyway, I don't often say this, but last season sometimes sitting down to watch Celtic was a chore. Watching that on Wednesday night was an utter joy. How important is that side of things to you as a Celtic supporter?
I think it's huge, Laura. We were talking yesterday about a coming together, and I remember various parts of my Celtic supporting life where everything comes together, be that the team, the management team, the fans, the club as a whole. And part of that, romanticism of being a Celtic fan is the style, as well as you say, the glory and the honours, because one of the most stylish teams I've ever watched ultimately were failures, and that was the team that Tommy Burns had, because we didn't win the league. We won one Scottish Cup, and the team that he built in the 2 seasons after that were fantastic to watch, but we didn't win the league. Fantastic to watch. We still talk about them all these years later. What's more important? Well, you've got to let the head rule the heart and say, well, of course, honours and trophies are more important. But if you can get both, and the other night we seen the other side of it, we seen the style and the flair and the entertaining football to the point where it had us on the end of our seats, it had us standing up for most of the game. And you come away from it thinking that's a vintage Celtic performance. I'm going to go back to that other game, and please don't, shoot me down for saying it. Anybody who's saying, oh, what a killjoy. But it does take me back to the elation that I felt after that 3-0 game. I'm sitting in front of the Celtic wiki here. It was on the 20th of February, 2011. We beat them 3-0, and the 2 goals were scored in the first half by Gary Hooper. We were 2-0 up after half an hour. Chris Commons scored the third, as you mentioned, Laura. And I remember coming away from that. We didn't win the league that season, you'll remember, And we came away from that game, and then we went to Fir Park, similarly, and it was in the February of that season. We went to Fir Park, and they beat us 2-0 at Fir Park. And there was a real feeling of disappointment in that particular game. I remember Charlie Mulgrew.
Was that the Scott McDonald goal?
It was the goals that were scored by, both goals actually were scored by Chris Sutton's wee brother. They were 2-0 up after 50 minutes.
I'm thinking of a different year. I remember Scott McDonald taking the title away from his 1 year as well.
Yeah,
but,
2005, yeah.
I remember, I'll never...
Was that as long ago as that? Wow.
I'll never forget that. But yeah, it was just the two fixtures and the scoreline obviously beating them 3-0. And that game, I remember when Commons scored, I still had the feeling that we would probably score another couple of goals that day. Beautiful sunny day. And we were singing "We Shall Not Be Moved" that day. I remember it well. I remember exactly who I was with and where I was in the stadium, as most of us do. I'm not getting the same kind of vibe, but I think that's probably the way Ange operates. You know, right, that's done. We've enjoyed it. We've done our lappy honour, and quite rightly so. But the other night, I just think it was a coming together. Everything was perfect. The atmosphere was unbelievable. We stuck one of our "You'll Never Walk Alone" videos up on the YouTube because it was a step above. It always is special at Celtic Park, but this was even bigger and better. The style of football was right. Some of the young talent that's coming in that we've barely seen performing the way they've been performing. Everything was just right. And there was a moment that JP brought up yesterday, and it was when Jamesy Forrest has committed himself and he's been basically poleaxed and he's sitting on the ground, and McGregor, the warrior, goes up to him, and they two guys that have got, they've got about 800, 900 games between them in Celtic jerseys, one club men, albeit one brief loan spell at Notts County for Callum, and he got him back to his feet. You know, so you've got you've got that nucleus of the Celts that have come through the ranks, Laura, as well as all the new guys that have come in and are finding their feet. But yeah, I think it's definitely substance over style. But as Celtic fans, we love a bit of style, don't we?
Absolutely. Not that you could look at us three and think that, but yeah, we do love a bit of style. Or I'll speak for myself on that one.
Cheeky today.
I have no words for that, Laura.
Uncle Tony's away.
You can have that. You can have that.
Controversial.
Liam Tennant, obviously the Scott McDonald goal was Helicopter Sunday. How could I forget it? Could be this type of season again. Who knows? I hope not. I'm not sure in my old age that my nerves could take it after all this time, but we'll see what happens. Jim, I wanted to get into some of the individuals. You're much more level-headed than me when it comes to these things. You like to put a bit of realism into things. We remember Lubo Moravcik's first game against Rangers and the fact he scored 2 goals and didn't really know what he'd done. We saw a similar look off Hatate when the second goal went in the other night, and undoubtedly he'll be remembered if he does nothing else in his Celtic career for that night. How excited should we be about him? How good is he really, do you think?
I think before answering that, maybe go back to the question you posed to Paul about Ange and his football. I think we've got used to it now. I think at the start of the season we were screaming at players to do certain things, and now we're pretty calm about stuff. And the other night, in the first half, particularly when it was just 1-0, and Carter Vickers and Starfelt were putting the ball back to each other, and then back to Joe Hart and back to Taylor. See, at the start of the season, we'd been going bonkers at that. Absolutely bonkers. And I remember at the Michelin game, been one of the 8,000 there, everyone's screaming, get rid of it. But now we're calm. Now we know that we're going to pass it about a wee bit here, and then we'll find an opening, and then all of a sudden, bang, 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 we'll go up the pitch. So I think we've got used to it. And I think some of the things that Dan from Japan said earlier have been absolutely spot on, because at the time I was quite cynical, thinking, that'll be right. And he's done everything, the style of football, how he builds teams, his eye for a player. He doesn't have to spend a lot of money. He knows who he wants to buy. So I think we're all on board with Ange. No matter what happens this season from now on, I think we're all on board with Ange. And that's why I don't think we should fluctuate from like, he's great, he's a dud, he's great, he's a dud. He's doing a great job, and again, long may that continue. In terms of Hatate, it's pretty early days, I think. The good thing, what I do like about it now, I think we've got a chance of beating Livingston this year, because we've got somebody who can shoot from outside the box for a change. I think when we play them, we play Hatate, basically just shoot the whole time, because you now realise there's only 14 games to go, and we're in the box seat, and you're starting to pay more attention to things now. Then you think, well, the post-split fixtures, that'll be interesting. Because the last 9-10, the league was won last season before the split, and most of the previous 9 seasons was won before the split. There's going to be a lot of interesting fixtures coming up, but we can touch on that when we get there. But you're starting to think a wee bit ahead now. And how can we beat Livingston in a few weeks' time? Because we haven't done that yet. We haven't even scored against them. Hatate, long-range shooting, because the shooting has been awful. Give the lad a few weeks. He's just in the door. He's made an outstanding contribution to start off with. Nothing I was thinking the other night was how many... Has anyone played in a Glasgow derby and scored 2 goals from outside the box in their first game? That's one for the... As Paul hits the wiki button there. That occurred to me. I mean, Lubo scored the 2 goals, but I think one was a header for about virtually on the penalty spot. I think maybe ish.
Yeah.
There's a wee question anyway. But in terms of Hatate, it's early days. He's made a great start. As has O'Reilly made a great start, and you couldn't wish for better because I mean anyone you sign's a bit of a risk. You know?
Yeah.
Maeda looked good, but he hasn't made the impression the other 2 guys have made. I think Maeda will start on Sunday. I think he'll freshen things up. I think mentally, physically, they're taking a lot of the players the other night. It's good the games on Sunday. That's another day's rest. I'd realised that until this morning. We're playing on Sunday and they're playing on Sunday as well. So Super Sunday coming up hopefully. So what was the question? Hatate, yes, Hatate, great start. Let's give him a few more games before we kind of go too mad on him. But brilliant the other night, for 60 minutes. Yeah,
Paul, Ange has commented on, in a way that might terrify the rest of our opposition, has suggested that Hatate's nowhere near fully fit. I mean, it's pretty obvious to see towards the end of matches that he isn't. How good could he get when he gets up to 100% fitness, given the amount of ground he has to cover? Kevin on the match coverage the other night was at pains to emphasise just how many blades of grass he was covering, and that's him at only 70% fitness or whatever it is. How good can he get, do you think?
Well, Kevin's turning into a bit of a stato. He's buying into the data analysis in a big way. But Rio Hatate, you look at everything that he's done since he's came here. I understand the Scholes comparisons because of the range of passing, Laura. I mean, no one could do that cross-field pass like Paul Scholes. And we see a lot of that from Hatate, but something that might go a wee bit under the radar is his defensive qualities. I mean, the amount of time he's winning the ball in our half, he's breaking up attacks from Rangers.
If there's one thing Scholes couldn't do, it was tackle. So if he's got one up on him, and as far as that's concerned,
So by the end of this podcast, we'll be saying that Hatate's better than Scholes, right? Another thing is that I noticed. You remember Petrov? I mean, the distance he covered in a game meant that by the end of the game, it looked as though someone had chucked a bucket of water over him. He was always completely dripping in sweat. Hatate's like that because of the work rate of the guy. And you look at the transfer fee and the age. He's 24, £1.38 million. Under £1.5 million. Jim mentioned it earlier on about getting the 9 players in under Ange. Our squad, our starting 11 against Rangers cost under 20 million quid. So the average was under £2 million a player. And you look at some of the value that we're talking about. Joe Hart, just over £1 million. Let's not forget 2.7 for Juranovic, under £3 million for Juranovic, and we're finally seeing the quality that he's got. But then you look at the Japanese signings, Matt O'Reilly as well, 1.62 million. Astonishing value for money. So how good can he get? I think he could be a staple part of the Ange era. And like Jim, I don't think we've seen enough of Edeguchi or Maeda quite yet. I like what I've seen from Maeda. I think we've got a lot to see from him. And if Edeguchi comes back in and he's another option in the midfield, great. At the moment, he doesn't look quite like a starter, but that's your strongest part of the park, isn't it? Midfield. I think Hatate is a starter, definitely.
Yeah. I can't see any different to that. Moving on to, you mentioned Juranovic, Danielle F, who's constantly in the chat. I seem to bring up her comments all the time, but she's always there commenting on things. Says, is Juranovic one of the steals of the summer? 2.5 million, he is class. Jim, I think the problem with Juranovic to start with was not of his own making. He was obviously having to fill in at left back an awful lot because of injuries and things like that. He's had a run at right back now, which is obviously his favoured position. We all know his attacking qualities, but he showed a lot of good defensive qualities on Wednesday night. What was your impression of his performance in particular?
I think he likes the big games. He made his debut at Ibrox at left back, and he was outstanding. And he was outstanding the other night as well. There's been some games where I think he's been a bit sloppy from time to time. I think it's a shame for Tony Ralston. after the impact he's made, because if we do go on to win this league, he's made a massive contribution, both defensively and offensively as well. In terms of Juranovic, to pay that money for an international player like him, yeah, it could be the steal. But I think we've had a number of steals, and some of them Paul mentioned. Joe Hart's a steal, and Kyogo, if he keeps playing the way he's playing, if you can make money on people, then that's a steal. I think it's when you spend big money on a Barkas or on a Yeti, that's not a steal, that's a robbery, or whatever the opposite of a steal is. Is it the same thing? Bring back Tony Haggard, he would know the right word to use there. But the opposite of a steal, basically. So as I said earlier, every transfer...
A gift, we'll go with a gift. We'll go with a gift. Yeah.
I wouldn't say a Yeti's a gift, but a gift from God. I'll be in a Yeti. His new autobiography. I'll get it. Tony will write it. No, I think what was it? Juranovic. Yeah, I think he's very good. He's very calm in possession. He knows what he's doing. Good addition to the squad. Great value for money. And another player. I always think if you buy a player and 6 months later and you can sell him and double your money, that's a good buy. Mm-hmm. And I think we could double our money in Juranovic. Not that I'm looking to sell the players, because that's your job, Laura. As you said at the start, you're all worried about Hatate getting sold. You need to calm down. He's just in the door. Just chillax, as the kids say these days. Chillax.
Chillax.
It's not going to happen. But I think, anyone could tell you that we're going to, if and when we sell Hatate, we'll get the money back and more. And looking at it from an accountant's point of view, which I always am, that's always a good sign. Juranovic for $2.5 million. That's good value. Another thing is, as I've said before, actually, good value is quite a subjective thing. We had a debate a few weeks ago about how much to pay for Carter Vickers. Is 6 million good value? Discuss. We did that a few weeks ago. But $2.5 million for Juranovic, that to me sounds like very good value. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I think one of the standout points of Ange's reign so far is not just the quality of the players he's brought in, but the value of them. Jim, I'm going to come back to you on this one just before we move on to look obviously at the Dundee United game that we played the other day, because I know we've not discussed that in any great detail, and then again ahead at Motherwell. But just a general question. Lucky Voodoo 15 says, I think in a year or so, if the progress continues with Ange, this could be a special time. Obviously, I'm talking about worrying about players leaving and things like that. And I was talking to my brother last night saying I'm very much of the mindset of I'm already aware that I need to enjoy this time with the team that we're building and the manager that we've got. Do you think Ange is showing all the right signs that he could be building another kind of Rodgers O'Neill type era with this Celtic team? I
think you're right not to get too excited. Who knows what will happen in 6 months' time? So I don't think we should be saying this is going to be a special team or building a legacy. He's doing really well, and long may that continue. But what if we don't win the league? What do the fans think then? They'll look back on certain games or certain decisions and say, he blew it then. Why did they let Yakimakis take that penalty? Blah, 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 blah. So I wouldn't look too far ahead. Enjoy the football that we're playing just now. Enjoy the victories that we're enjoying now. It's a dead exciting league. Take it for what it's worth, I think. I think virtually, not everyone, but most people had said, let's just keep in touch. Let's get to after the first derby, which we thought was going to be in the 2nd of January. And we want to watch there, getting that game, not getting it cancelled, but the winter break being brought forward. I mean, we had a huge benefit in that. If we'd have played the game the other night in the 2nd of January with Joey Dawson up front and whoever else, with tons of players missing, then it'd have been a big ask to have won the game. So I wouldn't go too far ahead. I think it's such an exciting league race this year. We've just got ourselves in front. Hopefully that's good timing that we can kick on from there. And you always look at these things after they've happened. We'll look back on the season and say, well, that was a vital goal there. That was a vital save there. Vital good win there. Last minute goal. And what's been good about the team, particularly last Saturday, I know you're going to come on to that, basically that last minute goal where you couldn't see it coming after Beaton gets sent off and you think Yakimakis gets taken off. So you've no physicality up front and they've got 4 giants at the back. It's not going to come, and it came. And that's the beauty and that's the excitement of football and that's the joy of football. Nothing like a last minute winner.
Yeah.
When it comes along. So enjoy it for what it is, because I think we're all saying stay in touch until the second derby. If we were within 3 or 4 points, maybe 5 or 6 points, there's still loads to play for. we're actually a point ahead. I think we're well ahead of certainly well ahead of what I thought would be at this point in time. And the quality of players that have been brought in have been astonishing. So you add all these things up, and people are saying that they're not a good team. They are a good team. They've got good players. A big squad, and they've got Aaron Ramsey's now come in. Whether he'll be good, bad, or indifferent, he's a big name, So they've got a lot of good players. From their point of view, they may look back at Wednesday and say, well, that was a bad night at the office, and they go out and hammer Hearts on Sunday, and it's kind of game on again. So there's a long, long way to go. But the good thing is it's dead exciting, and that's what you want, and that's what you kind of. There's a number of seasons during the 9 where we could have lost 5 games in a row and still win the league. Whereas every point's a prisoner. Every game, as I've said before, one goal changes a game, one game changes a season. And we'll look back on the Ralston goal, on the Abada goal, and think, if we hadn't scored that, if it ends up really, really tight, that was one of the goals. That was the big moments of the season. And I missed last week when you were doing a tribute to Wim, but there's loads of comparisons with 97, 98. So many games, last-minute goals, whatever it was. And if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have won that league. And hopefully we look back on this season, having won the league, and said that was the goal that won it. Well, it certainly made a significant contribution.
Yeah, I'll be interested to get your thoughts on Wim at the end of the show, Jim, because obviously you did miss last week, so it'll be interesting to hear what you've got to say, especially having written the play about Bradburn as you did. So it'll be interesting.
Shameless plug. That's good. I wrote a play. Good. Right.
Yeah. You wrote a play, and you wrote another one. I think that's going on a world tour to Glenrothes as well. So
the play what I wrote. Older people understand that.
Paul, Jim raises an interesting point there of, I think if you ask any Celtic fan, even the ones who were a bit suspicious of what Ange could bring to the club, they didn't know him, they didn't know his calibre, they didn't know his pedigree. I think if you ask any one of them now, their minds are changed, absolutely. What I haven't heard people talk about is what Jim brings up there, which is, have our aims for the season changed? I think, again, if you had asked most Celtic fans at the beginning of the season, given the nightmare that was the last couple of years, they would have been happy with us to get back within touching distance, get a few victories against Rangers like we did last night, and just look like a more together team. Do you think that is still the aim for this season, or do you think the way that we're playing, the expectations have risen as quickly as the performance of the team has?
Well, at the beginning of the season, and the beauty of doing the ACSOM Bulletin every day is that it's out there. There's a public record of your opinion. And I've always said from day one, and it's not I told you so because it's not happened yet, we've got to win the league. And every single season that I come into supporting Celtic, every single season, you've got to win the league. You try and win a domestic cup on top of that, and you try and be in Europe after Christmas. And that's like my own personal ambitions supporting Celtic every single season. So that was always there. And now I think people that were maybe a little bit more sceptical about that are probably changing their expectations because of what they've seen and because of what Ange has delivered. And like Jim says, there's a long, long way to go. But I do feel, we talk about the momentum shift, and I do feel that since, and I think this is going to be a pivotal moment of the season, since Rangers changed management, they haven't been the same beast. I think going into the game against Rangers at the during the week there, the momentum was in our favour. I think they had scraped past Livingston, they dropped points to Ross County, they dropped points to Aberdeen, they'd conceded goals, which was the big thing they didn't do last season. And I don't see anything in the transfer market that's going to prevent that side of the game. Aaron Ramsey, massive high-profile player. I'm sure he'll bring what he brings to the club. But that isn't really what the problem was it, really? I mean, at the moment, it's defensively. We've then scudded them with a 3-0 victory, and it's momentum Celtic. So my expectation is what it was at the beginning of the season. I'm more confident that we're going to do it now.
I think that's the big thing that Ange has brought in, is a sense of confidence and a sense of belief that we can do it. Speaking of that belief, we'll go back to the game against Dundee United, Jim. You mentioned about the goal coming as if from nowhere. It didn't look like it was coming. Is that a feature of this team, do you think? The fact that, I think maybe last season we wouldn't have got the victory out of that. Do you think that's more something we can rely on, that these players will keep going till the end and see if they can get the victory?
Before answering that, I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to go back to Paul. The point about I think the Gerrard leaving is pretty significant, and I think another similarity with 1978 when Walter Smith announced at the start of the season that he was going. That was his last season. That had an effect as well. No matter what you think of Steven Gerrard, he's quite a strong personality and he takes no nonsense. And I think the guy they've replaced him with is the opposite of that. I think he comes across quite weak, and I think in the post-match interviews I've seen, particularly after the Aberdeen game, I think if Steven Gerrard got interviewed after that game, he'd been going ballistic at officials and everything that was happening. He was going mad. Whereas Van Bronckhorst was quite kind of quiet and accepting of things. So I think there's a...
Didn't mind having a go at the ball boys, though.
Well, that actually annoyed me the other night. I mean, without trying to be the old negative guy again, I think these kids are representing Celtic. So I know it's a minor point, but just give the ball back to the keeper and don't give him abuse. I mean, if he score the goals, you celebrate. Stuff like, and that nutter that came on the park, find him and ban him for life. Don't give him any exposure. It's nonsense, because he ran straight towards Alan McGregor and he could have hit him and McGregor could have hit him back. Before you know it, you've got an explosive situation. It's not funny. Anyway, that's old grumpy talking there. What was the question again? Dundee United. So I thought we played well again, and if we hadn't have scored the goal, as I said, people would have been going ballistic about things and why bring on a 16-year-old with 10 minutes to go, we need to win the game, blah, blah, blah. But we scored the goal and the goal changes the game. And Abad, I mean, I've never said Abad is a bad player. He's not a winger for me. Never been a winger, because to me, a winger has got good close control and can cross effectively. And to me, that's Jota, that's Forrest. Abada, no a winger, but he's got a great eye for a goal and he's got great anticipation. And that finish the other night, brilliant finish, anticipates it coming in, hits it on the half volley against an inspired goalkeeper. First class, so in the same way I don't think Kyogo's a winger, I don't think Abada's a winger. But the wee man pops up last week, great first touch, great finish, bang, and all of a sudden we've won the game. Really significant. I thought we played them off the park last week. I thought the first game against Dundee United was a much closer game. They won each game. But I thought we controlled the game last week. The big chap up front should have scored 2 or 3 goals, so he was a dud last week. He was kind of half dud, half good guy on Wednesday. But last week, we had the chances to win the game. We played well enough. We never looked under any threat at all. There's been games we've maybe played, I think maybe was it the Motherwell game or the Aberdeen game, it was quite tight and you thought they might score. Never looked like scoring at all. Dundee United, it was always going to be 0-0. They defended really well. Their goalkeeper's great. Why we haven't gone for him, I don't understand. I mean, would you take Bain or their keeper? I'd take their keeper every day of the week. So I'm not sure why we gave Bain the contract and not signed Seekers. Anyway, the question was about, we just keep going, and that's what Ange said in that famous video, we just keep going to the end. I need a wee bit of luck sometimes, and I think if I was a Dundee United fan, I'd be going mad at the centre half. So, I mean, it was a bad goal to lose. They've got three giants in the box, and the Bada's about 2 feet tall, and he misses them all. Great control and great finishing. And getting back to what I said about the atmosphere in Wednesday night, there's nothing like a last-minute goal.
Yeah.
So when you get a game in a tight league race, different if you won the league by miles and you score a goal and you think, oh, good, we've won the game. But that made such a difference. And following hard on the score at Ross County as well, and how late they scored. I was walking up to the match and all of a sudden all these people are hitting their car horns and going mad. And you think, well, they must have scored then. That's brilliant. And then you think the incentive is there. And it looked for a long part of the game we weren't going to take that, make that advantage count, but then we did at the end, and these are the things again when you look back in the season, you'll think that was great. And as I said, I think it's just such a dead exciting season. We've got the League Cup in the bag. We're still in Europe, albeit the Conference League. We're still in the Cup, and we've hit the top of the league. We've only 14 games to go, so you can see the end in sight. Just keep it going. Just keep it going.
Yeah, I just hope we keep it going, or we take a little bit out of my nephew's book. So for a little bit of background, my brother-in-law is a Rangers supporter, and my 4-year-old nephew has decided to take the right road and is a Celtic supporter. So we were watching the game together the other night, and at full time he turns to my brother-in-law and says, "Sorry, Dad, but did Rangers still have fun?" I'm not sure that they did, but out of the mouth of the babes.
Fun, isn't it? It's all about the fun, yeah.
Paul, I'm not going to ask you any more about the Dundee United game because I know you were on the match coverage. Anybody wanting to know your thoughts can obviously go back and look at that and the podcast that followed. So we'll move on to looking at the game against Motherwell on Sunday. There's a few comments coming in. Well, I'll not read out the name, but he says, I would start with the same team that beat Rangers. I like the avatar as well. And then David Bradley says, good win against Motherwell will put good pressure on Rangers. Fancy 3-0 to Celtic. So that would be an interesting one as well. I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Given that we've got players still to come back, given that some might argue it wasn't the totally full-strength team, but we played so well, would you stick with that 11 going into the game on Sunday, or is there anything you would tweak about that team?
I think I would make a tweak or two here or there. And I'm not going to use this as an opportunity to have a dig at anyone. But I think it would be interesting to see Maeda getting a start. Maybe Angel look at that and say, well, you know what, that was a bridge too far even on Wednesday, after his travel and all that. But before I get into it, because I'm going to have to qualify that, because people will be thinking I'm having a dig at big Giakoumakis, which I'm not. The ball boys, just to pick up on Jim's point on the ball boys, I'm thinking about Celtic ball boys of a past era. And you've got Jimmy, a great image of Jimmy Johnston jumping up and cuddling his fellow ball boy as a Celtic youngster with the curly red hair. Obviously, people used to be mesmerised by him and the ball behind the goals. He used to do the keep you up and dribble as a kid. Then there's a great image of Billy McNeil scoring that famous goal at Hampden with a header against Dunfermline in 1965, and the wee guy that runs up and kicks the ball out the net is Andy Lynch, who 12 years later scores a penalty for Celtic in the same goal. And then there's that brilliant image of Callum McGregor as a ball boy celebrating, where you can see, I think, is it Aidan McGeady celebrating a goal?
I think so, yeah.
And I'm looking at that kid the other day there, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if he makes it at Celtic. He's already written himself into cult icon status. So I'm going to say to Jim, I think he's been very cute with that, mate. We already love him. And when he breaks through as an average left back, he'll get away with it because he was getting in about Alan McGregor the other night. But that being said, there's no excuse for anybody running on the park and trying to attack the goalie on another note. But with the ball boys... fair play to them, eh? They just got a wee bit excited. But on Sunday, I'm not a big lover of this current Motherwell side, I've got to say. I don't, I think that there are a few players in that side who have been a bit over the top when it comes to tackles against Celtic players. We've got a contributor to the State of Scottish Football called Jenna Thompson, who's a Motherwell fan, so we kind of keep tabs on the team from there. But I think looking at that starting lineup, you take out Giakoumakis just now, because I think he ran himself into the ground. That was the biggest part he played against Rangers. He harried, he constantly hassled them, he was down their throats, didn't always win the ball, but he didn't give them a minute, didn't give them a minute's peace. 3 saves he pulled, he forced 3 saves from Alan McGregor. He was a nuisance all night, but he lasted 60 minutes because he run himself into the ground. Whether or not he's going to have the legs for another game on Sunday, I don't know. I think I would like to see Maeda. I'd like to see him starting, and I've liked what I've seen so far of him. So that's my change for Sunday, Laura.
Well, that's an interesting one that you bring it up, because Toshtakoglu Junior Malone, another great name. Where he's come up with these, I don't know, guys, but it says, got to keep Big GG in for Sunday, get him a goal and get him off, keep his confidence going. So I think there's an acknowledgement there, like you say, Paul, that he might be a bit done in, but he maybe needs a goal for his confidence. Jim, where do you stand on that? Giakoumakis for Sunday, or do you think we get Maeda back in?
I think it depends on the kind of physical, mental reaction from the game the other night. I mean, Motherwell looked dead on his feet the other night, and I saw his interview after the game, and emotionally he was shattered. So I think Andrew take maybe 2 or 3 players out from the other night. We've got a big squad, and there's tons of games coming up, and not that we would take Motherwell lightly. Just checked the table there, they're sitting 4th, but they haven't won in the last 4 games. So they've got a wee bit of a dip in form. That was a bit of research I did there, seeing that. That's what I did. So they have a bit of a dip in form. They can't be that confident coming into the game. We're playing really well. We play the football, we win the game as long as the referee clamps down and applies the rules properly. I don't have an issue there, but they were a bit physical. They're a big physical team, and that's fine as long as the referee clamps down and things and takes the right action at the right time. I think the big man might make 2 or 3 changes. I agree with Paul. I think Maeda will start up front. If again he's physically, mentally fit after flying halfway around the world the other night, and also the sheer emotion of the other night. We as fans watched that, and Paul saying he's still drained just now. I mean, imagine if you're Matt O'Reilly, and you can see it, with that post-match interview. I've seen nothing like this at all. I mean, you're a fan watching the game. Multiply that by a big number. That must be what these guys are feeling. And all of a sudden you're at Fir Park, and there's only however many Fir Park holes these days. 8, 9, 10,000, something like that.
Yep.
Compared to what it was the other night. The other night was, as I said, it was pure theatre. And this is a kind of bread and butter game. And we've got a big squad, and guys like Ralston and maybe Scales and with Tom Rodgick's back, stuff like that. So the good thing is there's options.
Yeah.
Before Christmas, we were thinking we have got no players. That's all. And then we've got some big games coming up, and all of a sudden the winter break's brought forward and we get a chance to regroup. So I think Andrew used the squad. He won't make too many changes because he won't want to disrupt the momentum. But I think he may make 2 or 3 changes, one of which I think will play Maeda up front, maybe bring the big man on with 20, 25 minutes to go.
It'll certainly be interesting to see what he does there. But Paul, Jim touched on Matt O'Reilly there. We haven't talked much about him. I actually think he's been a little bit overshadowed because of the astronomical rise of Hatate to the fore. He's certainly had a baptism of fire as a Celtic player. He's come in from MK Dons, where, as Jim mentioned, he's not really seen anything like it before in terms of the atmosphere he was playing against the other night. I wondered if perhaps, Callum McGregor was absolutely vital, and he always is vital. He was key against Rangers the other night. But I've thought since O'Reilly came in, the fact that we're getting Rogic back, is this a chance perhaps to rely more on O'Reilly and the dynamism he brings to the midfield to give Callum McGregor more of a rest, do you think? Or do you think Callum McGregor, now that he's back in, will have to stay in?
Well, I think that's an interesting dilemma that Ange faces, because he said in the past, when asked about resting players, that he always plays, he never rests players. He actually said that. I think this would be an occasion where, given all the circumstances, it would be understandable if he was to rest them, because, Wednesday, the fact that he played was astonishing. His performance, I'm talking about McGregor, his performance was unbelievable. Never held back. There was absolutely no doubt in his mind that he was going to approach that game in the way he always has done. The comments made by Chris Boyd are nothing short of disgraceful in relation to the fact that, Rangers should have been more physical due to his injury. I thought that was shocking.
Yeah.
Not only for him to even think, the process of thinking that thought, but then to actually type it down. I doubt he types it. He's probably spoken to someone. And then for it to get past an editor, I think that's a shocking thing to say. I mean, that's almost like, go out to injure a player. And that's from an ex-pro. So, yeah, I would understand if he did it. I mean, it's not worked previously for other managers. We rested him against Ross County and they bounced us out the League Cup last season. But on your point of O'Reilly, if it was to happen, I have got, and I know I've only seen him for a few games, I've got some real faith in O'Reilly. I think when you look at his performances, I'm going to bring up the second goal here, because it goes back to a point Jim made about earlier on in the season. Why are you tippy-tapping the ball around the back, the back line? I called it the horseshoe. It was going from the left, through the centre halves, back to the right, sometimes back to Hart. That's exactly how the second goal started. So Cameron Vickers has got the ball. He's looking for an option that's not on, so he passes it to Starfelt. He gets it back. And then there's that passing movement to Juranovic, O'Reilly, Abada, Hatate, goal. And, the finish was tremendous, but look at the play leading up to that. And everybody's in sync. And O'Reilly was a massive part of it. And I think we've seen it in every game that he's played. So if he does decide to do that, and there's a wee bit more onus on O'Reilly, it's been a baptism of fire. And I think he'll be able to handle it. Laura, I really do. I think he'll be able to handle it. I'm not disrespecting where he's come from football-wise, the standard of football, but he's played at a lot of smaller stadiums for MK Dons. And, going out to Fir Park and grinding out a result, taking care of business, as I call it. I think he'll be more than comfortable in stepping in and doing that.
Well, there's praise coming in for him anyway. Paradise 63, O'Reilly is our best signing, and Centenary 88, O'Reilly is some player as well. So he's definitely already a bit of a fan favourite. And I think, like you say, those moves that Ange has been professing of knocking it around the edge of the box, how many times since they've both come in have we seen Hatate do that pass from the edge of the box out wide for O'Reilly, making the overlapping run to knock the ball in and get the ball to get a goal? Because that's just what we've been missing, is that end product to all of that work, and I think he's brought that. Jim, you've brought up O'Reilly a couple of times on the show so far. What do you make of his impact so far? Were you surprised at the impact that he's had, or did you like what you saw from the off?
Again, it's one of these signings Ange's made who I've never heard of before, so you've no idea what's coming in. Is he a big risk? Does he know it? I think context is very important. Tynecastle and a Glasgow derby. You're not going to get two tougher games than that. And he was outstanding in both the games. And he ran himself into the ground in both games. And I think, again, what I alluded to earlier, you'll have to get used to the Ange system, the intensity of the games, the intensity of the training. I think maybe that's not what he's maybe used to. But he obviously loves it. He obviously looks like he's won a watch coming here. The fact that the lad left Fulham because he wasn't getting a game, and so I think that says a lot about the guy. And Ange has said this before, but it's not just about their playing ability, it's about the people themselves. He wants to sign the right people. And I think people coming, without being stereotypical, but people coming from Japan, quite respectful. And I think Ange has been there, knows it. And that's why he signed some of the guys from there. So I think Ange obviously plays a huge part in who we sign now, which is great. The kind of conversation we were having this time last year was who was signing the players and why were we signing those players. Whereas, pretty much every signing Ange has made has worked out pretty well, and some of them worked out fantastically well. So he's not going to get two harder games than Tynecastle. That's next to Ibrox. That's the toughest place to go to. And he was outstanding in that game. He made the goal for the big man, didn't he? He passed the ball for Yakimakis' goal. Yeah. And he was influential the other night as well. So he's been a great signing, another great Ange signing. And as long as the big man keeps making these signings, again, we could be in for a special time. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
We could be in for a special time, but we'll see how it goes on Sunday. Hopefully we can keep that run going. Talking of special times, Jim, as you said, you unfortunately weren't on the show last week when we lost Wim Janssen after he's living with dementia before he died at the age of 75 last week. You, more than a lot of Celtic supporters, spent a lot of time researching the season that he was Celtic manager in depth for your play bend at Lake Bratback. What are your memories of Wim Janssen as a Celtic manager? What about him do you remember most fondly, and where do you think his place is in Celtic history, obviously?
That's quite a hard question. That's an easy question. I think social media is one of these things where if something happens, you feel, should I tweet something? Most of the time I don't tweet anything, but when Wim Janssen died, I think, well, I better tweet something because I wrote this play. You
might realise, Jim, I don't always have that thought process, But...
No, you don't. You're a bit of a dafty when it comes to that, so don't do that. Stay well away from it. So I thought I'll tweet something, but I won't tweet very much. And I just said, R.I.P. Wim, forever in your debt. And the play's a comedy. and there's one of the lines in the play talking about if they do the 10, they'll not be ripping the expletive out of you for a few weeks or a few months or a few years. It'll be for all eternity. They'll be ripping the proverbial out of you. That's what it means. And that's what Wim stopped. He stopped that happening. Because basically, if he didn't do what he was doing, you go to any football match just now, like the Glasgow derby the other night, and it wouldn't have stopped at 10 because we were a shambles then.
Yeah.
Before that, it would have been 11, 12, 13, 14, And that would have been, if fans were allowed in, that would have been the banners the other night, 10 in a row, 12 in a row, 15 in a row. And it was Wim Janssen that stopped that. But on the other side of the fence, it was quite good that there's no social media at the time. Because, again, like Ange, another similarity, we got off to a terrible start for those who are old enough to remember that. And we lost the first two games. And I'm sure Paul will remember the Dunfermline game, and I've mentioned this before to Paul, because another thing I put in the play is what you observe at the time. And we lost to Hibs opening game with Larson, passed it to Charnley.
Yeah.
And then we lose to Dunfermline at home. And I've never seen a more poisonous atmosphere, never heard a more poisonous atmosphere than that Dunfermline game, because this was the season they were going to do the 10. We had to stop them. And Dunfermline are playing us off the park. And it was one each at the time, and they hit the bar, and they hit the post, etc., etc. And then they scored. And this guy jumps up in front of me, and he says, F off, Larsson. F off, Janssen, and take that wee Fanny Larsson with you. So that's... If social media was kicking about back then, that would have been the kind of comment you'd have had times 1,000 that night. You know, get rid of Janssen after 2 games. And people were saying the same about Ange this year as well. You know, so there's been loads of similarities. He came, he saw, he conquered. And as I said, forever in his debt. And another similarity that happened that year, again, was the fact that the first Old Firm game, as it was called back then, was cancelled because Princess Di was killed. And I think if that game had went ahead, we'd have lost it, because it was the 4th game of the season and we were all over the place, and they were scoring goals for fun. Negri was scoring goals for fun. And that game got rescheduled, and we ended up, that was the game that Stubbs scored the last minute equaliser. So, you know, it was dreadfully unfortunate circumstances, but you know, we kind of gained by having that game cancelled. And I think this year with the winter break situation as well, I think we won from that as well. But in terms of Win Janssen, that's all I can say, forever in his debt for what he did. And I think you said it last week, or Tony said it last week, can't think of anyone who came to Celtic Park for 12 months and made such an impact so quickly. And there are lots of similarities between Wim and Ange in terms of he's got an eye for a player, plays to a system, he doesn't bend, you know, he sticks to what he believes in, no matter what other people are saying. And ultimately Wim was successful. And the big hope is that Ange can follow that as well.
Yeah, that's certainly a reputation he's got to live up to. Like you said, we talked about a single person having such an impact in a single season at Celtic. Ange is certainly on his way to if not completely emulating it, going a long way towards it. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. But yeah, as we said last week, our thoughts are with the Janssen family on their loss, and a big loss to world football. Thank you, Jim, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody in the comments. And thank you, Paul John. You should do this again. You've been very good.
You're pretty good. I got pretty good. I'm there.
If invited, if selected.
Yeah, no, I think you've got a future in this game. That's for sure. Yeah.
If he keeps his head down, doesn't do anything silly,
Didn't fault out with anyone on social media, etc. Yeah, I'll try my best.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Bright future, yes. Keep it going, son. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Don't forget, there's lots of content up on the channel to watch. The Alan Thompson interview is unmissable. If you haven't seen it, get that watched, get subscribed, and turn the notifications on for future content, which is coming down the pike, I am well assured. And we'll see you again on Sunday for the match coverage. Paul, Jim, thanks very much. See you all very soon.
Cheers, Laura.